Let's do that again. Brian Kelly was at his press conference today and had a lot of, quite honestly, great things to say. He calmed the fan base down in 30 minutes. He told you what not only was true, but that you needed to hear, you should have heard, and that was all the truth. He didn't pull punches. Now, Brian Kelly has been here for 2 years. He was hired and announced that he was hired at LSU on November the 30th in 2021. So he's been here for just a little over 2 years. And in the 2 years of covering Brian Kelly, I have not heard a press conference better than that one. Now, you don't win at press conferences. You do not win games at press conferences on a mic. You don't. Not in his position. Probably a little ironic me saying that. But we're going to have to understand what he's trying to build here. Now, we understood it a year ago at this time because you're coming off of playing for the SEC championship game. You think you're rolling in a direction. And look, you're 9-3 or 9-4 technically and 22, but you've won 9 games in the regular season in back-to-back years under Brian Kelly. You know, there are teams like Texas A&M who spend a lot of money. They would pay literally, and they're trying to pay $78 million to go to just have 9 wins. And yet that you're here. Brian Kelly did not shy away from the questions from the media today. And I thought Jeff Duncan, who's not even on the LSU beat, phrased it perfectly when he said, now that is how you avert, and that's how you handle crisis management at the mic. Because Brian Kelly, when asked about his defensive staff, said a couple of things. Number one, he says, we are here to win championships. Our defense did not play to the standard that it should be at. Bottom line, they didn't. And you know it, I know it, everybody knows it. But for a coach, in the way that he said it, to come out and say it the way that he did, guys, changes are coming. So whatever you heard, whatever your cousin or whatever your source or your third cousin removed that knows a guy at LSU, all the deep sourcing that you have, everything that you heard about there not being changes was a lie. Everything. He would go on to say that, look, we're not making changes at the current moment because guys on staff have responsibilities that they have to achieve before they leave LSU. Well, why would he say they have responsibilities before they leave LSU? Well, which just tells me that they're getting through signing day and then changes will happen. The evaluation process will continue. But here's the truth. Look, we lose sight of this because you hear this thing about Brian Kelly, you hear that thing about Brian Kelly. I still believe him when he says he wants to win a national title. I think he wants to win multiple national titles at LSU. You know it, and I know it. That's the only thing missing in his resume in being one of the elite coaches at the tippity top. He's got to get there. Now, are there some things he's got to change? Number one, yes, it's defensive staff. There are a lot of guys on the defensive staff I really like as a person. But it doesn't change anything. Now, Brian Kelly made a humorous thing today in saying that he fired a defensive coordinator 3 games into a season, and the guy was in his wedding. He will make changes. You got to believe him. He's not going to let the ship sink because of something that he thinks is invalid and flawed. But he has to be able to knock it out of the park this year with coaching, because you got to get guys in here that can recruit, because Brian Kelly is the ultimate CEO on field. I think he's a hell of a recruiter. Maybe needs to be more hands-on in some things. But you go out there and get elite talent, like really good talent, which you have the ability of doing. 1,000% have the ability of doing. There's talent out there that you can get from your own state, whatever. Well, Blake, what about NIL? Guys, there's money being spent at LSU through NIL. We'll talk about Charlie Baker here at the end of the show. You got to have guys that can develop. Recruiting does not matter if you can't develop. It doesn't. Because guys, the truth is you are in the top 5 in the country in blue chip ratio. You should be a top 5 team. There's no bones about that. You being one of the teams that has more prospect talent than anybody else, we did not develop at a high rate. Now, I need to bring something up because I think it's long overdue. Because we've talked about staff. Well, the staff's going to get changed. Well, let's talk a little bit about personnel. I've heard from a lot of you saying on guys like Denver Harris, Deuce Chestnut, 5- and 4-star guys, Blake, let them play. So what? They're a little late to the meeting. Guys, I got to tell you something. That's BS. That's 1,000% BS. What it takes to be great is doing things that nobody else will do. If you want to be elite, if you want to be great, you show up on time. I know you don't want to hear that. I know that you do not want to hear about showing up on time and guys being benched. But at some point, these young men, not boys, young men have to grow up. Greatness costs your livelihood sometimes. What do I mean? If you want to be great at something, like every one of us does every day, you got to take away time from your family. You got to take time away from your friends, your hobbies, things that you want to do. You got to take time away from that to be great. That's the culture that has to be and must be established at LSU. Because let me tell you something. Let's look at the teams in the playoff right now. You ready for them? Alabama. What do they have? Do you think guys are late and not on time for Nick Saban? No. Or they're not going to play. Number 2, do you think guys are late around Michigan? Harbaugh's a lot of things. A stickler for the rules that he sets. Yeah, it's not happening. I can promise you the same is going on with Washington. And maybe there's a little lax things going on at Texas with Sark, but they're a really disciplined football team that wants to be elite, that wants to be great. Georgia, who's also not in the playoff, is exactly the same way. You don't change your philosophy and rules because your defense sucks. Oh, I guess I'll just let him come late for meetings. Bullshit. When you start doing stuff like that, Orgeron happens. Because O was letting guys be late for meetings all the live long day because he didn't give a shit. I know that you heard it. I heard it. Your Meemaw heard it. Everybody heard it. Greatness takes time out of your day that maybe you can't go to lunch with your buddies. You know who probably that everybody on that team should have seen that happen to? It's number 5. Spending his own money during the weekends, flying out to California with Bryce Young, them meeting up with each other, getting in a car, a rent-a-car, going and meeting C.J. Stroud in L.A. so that they could work out together. Greatness takes – Peyton Manning never talked about, hey, man, I'm out here working all the time. You heard it from other people about the greatness and what they do. That also goes for staff. The offensive staff's doing it. And that's where our shakeup's going to be. Now, to wrap up on the staff and some of the personnel stuff, and that's not a shot at Denver Harris. That's not a shot at Deuce Chestnut. But if you want to be great, you got to make sacrifices. You got to say, hey, little buddy, if you have a kid, if you're like for you that are listening to this, you got to sacrifice things. Last thing on the staff. I think they're going to go out and get recruiters. I think they're going to go out and get guys that can bring bodies in here that can play. There are guys that are currently in the transfer portal that are from Louisiana that have gone to other SEC schools that can play. Maybe not all SEC schools, but some of them. You got to get D linemen. They're going to get them. You got to get corners and safeties. Well, there's 2 in the portal right now that I feel pretty good that you can lean on and go get. one from the SEC? Do other players get into the portal? They got a 30-day window just to enter. Are there guys from Louisiana that you have no idea that may enter the portal that you can go and get? Yes, yes, and yes, because you got to replace pretty much your entire secondary. You got some guys there can play. I think Javian Toviano can play. I think Sage Ryan is going to return. I think Sage Ryan has gotten better and has been not too bad at the boundary. When you add portal talent to experience, great things happen. You know how I know? It happened in 2022 when you won the West. You had some bumps in the road, sure, but you have an entire offensive line that pretty much is going to be returning. You don't have the two top receivers, but you have dogs in that room. Possibly you're going to go get another one that not only can catch the football and didn't have an offensive system that fit him and Xavier Thomas. Let's go get him. Let's go get him. I don't think you're as far off as you think that you are. What do I mean? I don't think LSU, even though that this year was so bad and things were bad defensively, I don't think from a talent standpoint, you're as off as you think that you are. Well, Blake, the D-line was really bad. The linebackers were bad. I get it. But historically, when you start building the way that they are building and gain, guys, a lot of these dudes next year are going to be the core of their team is going to be juniors and sophomores. The core of it. But they're going to have a lot of seniors that's returning too. You're adding in a lot of freshmen. Guys, you're closer to the 85 scholarship limit than you've ever had. You're probably going to see guys hit the portal that you're like, man, I didn't think that he'd hit the portal. Only because, look, you're at the 85 scholarship limit. Now you got to coach them up. Now you got to develop them. Because if you don't, then we have issues. I think that they will. I 1,000% will. Now, I'm going to say this too, because Brian Kelly said that he thinks that of the players that can return, 10 of the 11 on defense are going to return. And people said exactly what Brian Kelly mentioned in his press conference. Well, if those guys are returning, that means that your defense is going to be any good next year. That's not historically true. History in college football tells us that when players continue to gain experience and continue to play games, historically they get better. And if there's any team in the SEC that can say that, and you know it to be true, guys, LSU is that place. It 1,000% is that place. You've seen guys like Burrow do it. You've seen Jayden Daniels do it. Blake, those are quarterbacks. What about Damone Clark? What about Rashard Lawrence? What about Patrick Queen, Jacob Phillips? You've seen guys. What about Brandon Taylor, who's been on this show? You've seen guys develop. Sometimes you got to give them time to gain experience and get more mature into what they need to do. Does it suck? Was it a down year? Yeah. But I'm going to tell you, you're not going to like me saying this. I've said it before. If the outright down floor, meaning the worst that you can do, which I don't think you can get much worse under Brian Kelly than what you are. Now, can you? Sure. Did Brian Kelly have a 4-8 season? Sure. That had a lot of other things to do with that were out of his control. If 9-3 is your floor, I can't wait to see what the ceiling is. Because I think that they're managing and doing things at floor level. I don't think that they have taken that next step. Even though offensively they have, defensively they stayed stagnant and didn't do anything. They didn't develop. You got to get new blood in there. You got to be able to look these guys in the face and say, hey, man, yeah, you won the West last year, but you don't have that Rocky III movie, Eye of the Tiger. The offense did. Defense, guys, I'm going to tell you, look at any show that we did during the quote-unquote offseason, the non-playing portion of the year. What did I come out here and do and say? Wrote article on top of article on top of article the entire summer. You can go over to ayssnetwork.com/forum and read it for yourself. I went back and checked it today just for reference. June the 3rd. Hearing things about going early summer about what is going on with LSU. Hearing the offense is hitting it on all strides. This is a quote from me. Hitting it on all strides while the defense continues to struggle. July 17th, day after my birthday. Defense continues to struggle. I don't know if there's anybody in the country that can guard Malik Neighbors. Wonder how that played out. Last line in there. Today, I put $100 on Jayden Daniels to win the Heisman. Because if it is remotely close to what anything that I'm hearing, he's going to win the Heisman Trophy. Sometimes when somebody tells you who they are, you got to believe them.